All right, hello, rockers, rollers, and metal maniacs. It's the Meista from Brews and Tunes. Cheers. Absolutely thrilled today to be chatting with the indelible, the one and only Mr. Carl Canedy, of course, of the Rods, as well as many other bands. Absolutely thrilled to be chatting with you today. How you doing, Carl?
I'm doing great, and thank you so much. Your uh, your review was the first review, and just thank God it was because you had such kind words. And I'll tell you, if it had been anything different, I might have been curled up in a ball because I've been dreading, I've been dreading reading the reviews because you never know which way it's going to go. I've
Yeah,
released obviously lots and lots of albums, and I take reviews with a grain of salt. Good reviews, bad reviews. Like I always tell young musicians, don't believe all the hype and don't believe all the negative. It's in the middle.
yeah.
So don't get too upset. But with the book, it's so personal, and I just wasn't sure. So thank you so much because I couldn't have had a better first review.
Oh, great.
Now if somebody tries to kick me in the balls on the reviews, I'm good with it now. Go ahead and take your shots.
Well, and of course, what we're talking about is, yeah, you have an autobiography coming out April 4th, I think is the actual release,
Yes,
right?
correct.
Tales of a Wild Dog, Memoirs of a Rock Warrior. And it's a story of your life, like from the beginning up until pretty recently. And
Mhm.
yeah, I was as I was telling you before, I was enthralled. I was lucky enough to get an advance copy from your PR guy. And yeah, I read it in 3 days. I could not put that book down. It was fascinating. I was just enthralled with everything I was reading. And I think there's two reasons for that specifically. One is just how candid you are, how honest you are, how open you are. And then also just because your life is fascinating. I mean, it truly is. But I just the honesty, the openness of it, I thought was really cool, especially um what I found really fascinating because I've read several autobiographies by musicians before, but what I really loved about your book is that you have commentary from many people in from your life, both musicians and relatives and friends, maybe even some that I don't, not necessarily enemies, but people that are not necessarily your friends, particularly. And I thought that candidness and that willingness to add that element was really cool. I mean, I've never really you see that a little bit, but not so much to the point where sometimes they contradict you a little bit. And I thought
Mhm.
that was really cool, where you're like, okay, here's how I remember this, but here's somebody else's view of it. And I thought, I mean, you don't, that's very candid. I mean, you really kind of expose yourself in a lot of ways. And I think that I have a lot of respect for that. I think that was one of the reasons I really loved the book too. Um,
Thank you so much for that. It's interesting you say that, and I'm glad you recognize that because first of all, I'm always open. Like I've always been that way, and when people have had crap to say about me, and somebody will say, "Well, aren't you upset?" And I would say, "You know what? It comes out in the wash." Like people say things, but I said, at the end of the day, it's about what you've done and how you continue to carry on with your career.
yeah.
So the sticks and stones things has never really bothered me. I've never been concerned about it. But with the book, the co-writer who really kept me on track, and we this is almost 500 pages whittled down to 300 pages. So there's a lot we couldn't even put into the book. And that was actually a hard part of it was going back in and editing out, you know,
Oh, I'm
what
sure.
we already put into the book. That was difficult. But Doc, Phil Harrington, my co-author, he suggested getting a commentary. So once we did that, we think that is really cool. And I said, he said, why don't we do this for, everything? And I said, I always loved the Rolling Stones thing with Mick and Keith, where Mick will say, "Look, we were doing this date, and we fell off the stage, and it was hysterical." And then Keith will go, "We never played that fucking gig, mate." And
Right.
it's like I always love that because Keith Richards didn't always remember everything quite the way Mick did,
Yeah.
and I love that. So I said, "Yeah, let's do it." And I said the one caveat to this is I won't edit anybody's commentary. They can say, they have carte blanche. They can say whatever they want to say about me, good, bad, or indifferent, and we won't edit one word. We won't change it. We will print it as they say it. And I thought that was a really, I wouldn't say risky, but it was, I felt that was the right thing to do. Why ask somebody for commentary when you're just going to color it, make it, oh yeah, they say, well, the guy was an asshole, and you go, he felt that there were some challenges in the studio with him, but you really said he was an asshole.
Yeah.
So I thought that was something that we had to do, to be completely honest and transparent. And it is what it is. And like you said, contradictions of what, they see it one way, I see it another way, whatever the case may be, we're both telling what our truth. And that's cool. The readers can decide what, what's the truth and what's not. And,
Right.
or
Right.
if we're both bullshitting them.
Yeah, I thought that was a really cool approach. I really liked that. Well, so I guess one of my big questions, I probably should have led with this, was what was the impetus for this? What made you decide, I need to write a book about my life? Like what, I mean, because that's,
That's a great question.
I mean, that's challenging, I would imagine, and also a scary prospect. I mean, there are things, I don't know if I want to share, and you're really open. Like you share some pretty personal things, and some pretty heavy
Mhm.
stuff, and some really beautiful moments as well, which, were private moments until now.
They're absolutely private moments. Um, through the years, and I would say in the last 7 years or so, there have been some interviews I've done where a couple of people have said, you really should do a book. In fact, there's one Russian writer who had done a three-page spread on me, and he was like, you got to do a book. You have a lot of stories. And so we talked about collaborating on a book, but then we decided between the time difference, and the language barrier, that it wasn't going to be easy and really feasible to do.
Right.
So as time, I had a couple more people, and finally Philip Harrington approached me, and I didn't want to. I didn't want to type. I didn't want to. I type fairly fast, but I didn't want to type because it changes the whole rhythm of what you're saying. And my daughter has said, since she'll say periodically, I'll share a story from my childhood, and she said to me one time, you know, all the stories from your childhood are so sad. And I thought, wow. I said, I thought, I really want to share my life and leave that for her. And I thought, if I do that with audio files, she'll have this in me telling the story of my life, and she'll have that. And she can pass it on to her children, but she'll have it either way. And so when Phil approached me and said that he would transcribe my audio files, I thought, well, that's it then. But the impetus was, and I think you can see from the book, my daughter and I are very close. My daughter, we're still close, and we were close all growing up, all through her childhood. I spent a lot of time with my daughter, had her in my recording studio. I had a nanny there. And then Erin would come in with me, and even when she was young, she'd fall asleep. Well, I'd be on the phone all day, but there would be lunch break, and she'd fall asleep in my arms after she ate lunch, and it made me stop. And it was a great bonding experience. So I wanted to do it for Erin, and so once Phil gave me that opportunity, and it is a blessing that I can never thank him enough for that, because it wasn't easy for him. And there was a point where I decided that this was really difficult. And sometimes the transcriptions, he couldn't maybe understand something. And at one point there was a line that as I read it, it went, shedding copious tears. And I went, copious tears. I've shed a lot of tears, but I've never shed copious tears. And I thought, I never said that. And of course it was from the transcription, because he would transcribe it and run it through transcription software.
Mhm.
But at that point, I had to go back and just like, is this really my story? Are these my words? And so that was like Humpty Dumpty, putting it back together. I would find things that would be a she instead of a he. And
Yeah.
at some point, I was like, he's like, this part of the process, relax. And I was like, I can't relax. This is horrible. And he kept me on track. Phil, I can't say enough about Doc. He's been the best. He's really kept the story moving and kept me in the right direction, and didn't let me go off rambling like I am now. And it was great. But I did it for my daughter is the short answer, and I'm really happy I did.
Yeah, nice. That, I mean, that was one thing that I also I got from the book, most definitely was, yeah, your dedication and your love for your family. That really comes across, and your friends too. But I mean, I think, that really came across was, yeah, your love for your daughter and for your wife, and your dedication to your craft as well, which, I thought was amazing. And it's always difficult doing an interview like this because, I want people to read the book, so I don't want to ask particulars, specifics necessarily, especially, what's in
Spoiler
the
alert.
book.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah, because I want people to read the book because it's fascinating. But there's definitely some really really interesting stories in there. There were things I knew about, being a Rods fan. There are things you're gonna know, but there's a lot that I had no idea. Um, which was really fascinating. And then things that, I've heard, in other interviews, maybe with you or say with, the guys from Anthrax, like, with Victoria and the Rock Hotel. Like I knew a little bit about that,
Mhm.
it was kind of this, mythological world that, from interviews I've heard in the past. So it was really cool to get a more developed picture of what that is, and your work with Johnny Z and, yeah, I mean, it's just really fascinating. I mean, just the history alone is incredible,
And
you know.
Johnny was writing the foreword to my book. And, we talked a lot. We would talk several times a week. And toward the end, he was trying to write the foreword. And finally, I just said, John, it's okay, and he died like 3 days later.
Wow.
But, I really wanted him to write the foreword. But as he got, as he got sicker, I just couldn't, he tried, but, you know, but still, my relationship with John was very, very important, and for more ways than just the production side of things. He was a mentor and he was a friend, and he knew a lot about stock. So I remember driving to Elmira. It's a 2-hour drive for me, and we were talking stocks, and I went and bought some stocks just from talking to Johnny.
Oh, wow.
He was a brilliant guy, and but a great guy, and he never really spoke ill of anyone. He would say things like with Anthrax, for example, his comment was not anything negative about Anthrax, even though he had some dealings with them that maybe weren't that happy at times. But he said Anthrax is for Anthrax. He didn't say Anthrax screwed me on anything. He wouldn't say anything that crass or that blunt. He'd say, well, Anthrax is for Anthrax. And that's how he was. He was kept it on a positive note, and which I've kind of taken my cue from that. Keep
Yeah.
it positive or keep it out.
Yeah, and I thought that was one of the other things that was great about your book. Yeah, it's very positive, even though you're dealing with some heavy issues, especially, with your childhood and your family. Um, it's a very uplifting book. I mean, that's what one of the things one of the takeaways for me also was just, yeah, there's a lot of joy and celebration, I think, of life and in that book, which, yeah, I found, you know, inspiring in a lot of ways, for
Yeah,
myself.
thank you so much. And that's why, as I said, my daughter would say, your childhood was all the stories are so sad. And I wanted her to know the whole story, that I've had a great life and I don't have regrets. And that's amazing to say, quite honestly. But that's how I feel. Because people have asked me specifically about Manowar. Why didn't you stay with Manowar? Why did you leave? And whatever my reasons were, um, I've never looked back. I've never had a moment of regret.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and yeah, and I think you spell it out in the book a little bit, why you chose to go the path you took.
Mhm.
And for me personally, I've been, yeah, I think I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did so. I mean, I adore the Rods, and yeah, that wouldn't have happened, if you had stayed with Manowar, and who knows what would have happened. But yeah,
And it's hard to believe David and I have been together 45 years.
wow.
And, I get to play with somebody I find is, I've told him this before, like as much as we're peers and we're bandmates and have been, and we're equals in the band, we both make the decisions. Um, and of course, now with Freddie in the band, it's really a new day and fantastic for all of us because we all contribute. But I'm playing with somebody I consider, a hero, an idol. I'm a big fan of Rock's. You know, I love his style. I love his playing. I love his whole approach. He's a cool guy.
Yeah, yeah. What a voice and what a guitar player. I mean, just yeah, such richly textured solos.
Right. The emotions and the feel of what he plays is
Yeah,
just great.
yeah. I love it. I love it. Especially the yeah. I mean that's a good segue into yeah the new album, Rattle the Cage.
Oh,
Came out in January.
nice. You have the vinyl.
Yeah, what a great album. Oh my gosh. It's fantastic. It's what I love about it is it's new and fresh, but it still has, it's the Rods. And it's
Mhm.
got, and even the record cover, like has a nice nod, Mark Rizzo's beautiful artwork. It has a nice nod to the Wild Dog.
Mark did a great job.
Yeah.
Great job on the cover.
Yeah, very cool stuff. Yeah, and there's even I love the is it Lonnie Park? Is that the keyboard player? Uh
Hmm.
it does some really and it's subtle, but it's nice because there's yeah, it gives it a nice groove and a nice there's like kind of like a little bit of like a deep purple Uriah Heep element to it, with
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
Hammond organ and yeah, very very cool album. Very cool album.
And Mark, we David and I had talked about on the new album cover, we wanted it to be a grittier, dirtier, nastier album cover. And so we wanted to continue working with Eric Philippe, but unfortunately, Eric was very busy and we rushed to get this done and out. Otherwise, the record label would have made us wait until August. And we're like, we can't do that. We are not, 21. We don't have the years to give away a whole year just waiting for an album to come out. So I really pushed. And in the meantime, Freddie, this is Mark is Freddie's childhood friend. They're best friends since third grade or something. And so he said, let me reach out to my friend Mark, who's a graphic artist. And Mark came back in a day with this cover
Wow.
so fast. He gave us four examples. And the one I called the puppy version, which was a slightly, like I was exaggerating, but it wasn't quite as ferocious. I'm like, no, we can't have the puppies because I think Freddie and David were like, we like this one. I'm like, can't have the puppies on the cover. It doesn't work. So they've since said, it's good we didn't go with the puppies.
Yeah.
But Freddie's involvement has been fantastic. And then David and I were sequencing the album, and we were each one song off. Like we just didn't quite nail it. And for both of us, we all like I think this song should go here, and I think he thought this song should go there. So David said, why don't we let the new guy sequence the album? So Freddie sequenced the album, which I think was brilliant
Yeah.
because he had a different perspective and it's really good. I love the way he sequenced the album. I think it keeps it flowing and
Yeah, I would
so
say yeah, it's got a really nice flow to it. I mean, what I love about it, yeah, it opens hard and just goes. I mean, yeah, it's like a roller coaster ride. Like once you get on that ride, you're going. Um, yeah, and I love it. It's one of those albums for me that yeah, as soon as it ends, I flip it right back over. It's like I need more. I gotta get more. Yeah, I
that's so cool. You have the vinyl,
yeah, red. It's red vinyl too. It's
red vinyl. Oh, nice.
yeah, it's beautiful.
I had to beg, I had to ask the company to get because we each got one copy, of each color and so I'm like, I'd like the extra couple. So I had to beg the label and they found a couple for me, but they sold out immediately.
Wow, that's
So
great.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, very, yeah, that's really good news. Do you guys have do you have shows lined up to promote the album? Are you doing any shows?
we decided that we're playing the 20th of April in Ithaca at Lakeview or Lakeside, which was the old North 40, which I played there with so many bands over the years, including the Rods. That's with Jim Florentine. We're playing after Jim Florentine. It's an early show, so we go on after Jim Florentine, and it's a free show at that point.
Oh,
But Jim Florentine it'll be cool with us and Jim Florentine. He's been a big supporter for years and years, so it'll be fun to be on the bill with him.
yeah.
And uh, and then we have July 6th, Time to Rock in Sweden, and we're looking at three other dates that are regional dates. And then of course we're negotiating with Australia for some dates, 4 dates for us, more in the fall. And that's it. We decided there's so many regional dates we could play, but we decided we'd continue to work on. I just finished a drum track yesterday for the new Rods album, and that's what we thought we would do. We would focus on the new album and getting it done
Nice.
before we started trying, because it's disruptive. Not that you don't want to go play gigs, but it takes as much work and effort to get one show to play one show as it does to play 30-date tour.
Oh, okay.
So it's hard to like it takes a lot of time to gear up. You have to do rehearsals and whatnot. So this way it allows us time to complete this album. And the song I completed is I keep saying it. It's one of the best songs David's ever written and sung. And I played it here in the house, and my daughter, they agreed that it is the best song they've heard coming out of the Rods.
Cool. Wow.
So I'm excited for people to hear it because every time I hear it, I'm blown away. So we'll see. It'll be interesting to see what you think of it when you hear it.
Yeah, I can't wait. Yeah. Do you have a target date at this point to, I mean, I know you're still working on the album, obviously, but
Yeah, we'd like to finish it by August.
oh wow. So yeah,
Mhm.
full speed
And
ahead.
we're well along. David has already tracked 8 songs, and so we're in good shape.
Wow, that's great. That's another thing that kind of circling back to the book too. That's one thing I've always had a lot of respect for you for is your work ethic. I mean, I don't even know how you keep all this straight because I mean, you're a real estate agent, you're a newly grandfather,
Mhm.
congratulations by the way. Uh,
Thank you.
you're a parent, you're drummer in more than one band. You're a producer. I mean, yeah, you have a lot of stuff in the fire right now, a lot of irons in the fire. So all the time and always have, it seems like, which definitely
Mhm.
comes out in the book. You can see, reading the book, like how busy you always were and always have been. Um, yeah, it's,
My daughter says it's my life is drums and real estate. And that's fine with me. Today I worked on a lot of real estate, and and then when I'm done, then it's back to recording drum tracks.
nice, nice. I would imagine too, like, especially if you have a really heavy, rough day, it's probably nice to be able to come home and pound on the drums a little bit and get some of that emotion.
So it's funny you say that because when I was up until the time I was 13, and now you've read the book, so you can really relate or understand what I'm saying. But up until I was 13, I was the sweetest kid. I would make dinner for my mom. I was like the nicest boy. And then I turned 13 and I started having the revelation of what was going on around me in my life. And I didn't understand I knew something, but I didn't know what it was. And suddenly at 13, I became the proverbial angry young man. And it was like a switch. I went from la 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 to like the nasty, angry young man. I was pissed at the world.
Yeah.
And so, that was for me playing drums was something I realized that by playing the way I was playing, I would just exhaust myself and get that anger out and that frustration. And that was a great release.
Yeah.
And to this day, it still is. I'm playing last night. I'm like, oh my God. It's like gets all this crap out. And then I'm like, plus I love playing drums. It's been my passion since I was 4.5. And, having to wait until I was 13 to get a set of drums, I hit the ground running. But, it's funny that I still have to this day, I still have that. If I don't practice or play my drums, it's just the day's not right for me. So I feel guilty. Something's not right. My world isn't quite where I want it to be. So I guess that's a great thing at my age.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'd love that. Yeah, I could see how it could be very cathartic. Just yeah. I mean, for me, I'm not a musician, but for me, it's if I've had a day, it's come down to the studio, throw on a Rod's record, throw on an AC/DC record, Judas Priest, whomever it might be, blast it, and just kind of
Mhm.
decompress. Maybe
Yeah,
crack open a beer, and I do some art, do some painting, and just you know
nice.
blast some
Yeah, well,
really loud and yeah it's perfect, it's perfect. um I wanted to ask you, and I just forgot what I was going to ask you. I can't believe. Um, it was about the book. It was something you just said, and my brain shifted. I wanted to ask you about. Oh, uh, I thought it was really cool and really because you had told me a little bit about this. I think when I interviewed you before, you talked about, just that drum set, that red drum set at I guess
Mhm.
it was the VA, and I loved how you essentially opened the book with that story, which I won't ruin here, but and that's another one that there's so many great stories in there. And you had mentioned at the beginning of the interview today that yeah, you had 200 pages that you stripped down. Um,
Mhm.
I would imagine there's some pretty fascinating stories in there as well. Is there any consideration of would you ever release that at some point, maybe at a later date? Have you
You know,
thought about
you know, yeah, that's a really interesting question. Doc has suggested that we do a revised version at some point, abridged or whatever. I don't, I think when I do, I'm just setting up for the audiobook. I don't know if you can see it in the background here,
that? Okay.
but there's a little um, vocal booth, portable vocal booth that I'll be using for doing the audiobook. And I'm sure I'm going to embellish, there'll be things that will trigger things and I'm just going to embellish them, when I'm doing the audiobook. But as far as the others, we've talked about that. I mean, I would love to have that's what was cut out, what was edited, that's interesting because, there was actually a lot of commentary that was long and self-serving in some cases, not all, but sometimes it was long and self-serving, which is totally understandable and fine. But it just has a lot of it had to be cut. So you could put some of that back, stuff that would be interesting. So I would love to see that myself, and whether that would be in a PDF version, which might make more sense because it's really the PDF is much more affordable than a book.
Yeah.
So
So maybe yeah, kind of like a little bonus material. I love the idea that you're doing an audiobook, and I love the fact that you are doing it. I think that's great. I always love when a book is in anytime I've ever listened to an audiobook, I love it when it's in the author's voice. So you really
mhm.
get, especially a nonfiction book. I think that's important that often that it's the author's voice relaying these events that are your events, not somebody else's. So the emotion is going to be, much more impactful.
That's that's probably what I'm most concerned with. I was actually going to start it tonight, but I think I'll wait and start it Sunday. But because we have a rods rehearsal tomorrow.
Hmm.
But I'm wondering how it's going to be recounting the book because I haven't enjoyed reading certain parts of the book, because there are parts of it that are, I'm glad I told the story and I was glad I was truthful, but it's also, reliving moments that I've lived. And
Yeah,
so going back and reliving them again and again, it's like, yeah, but so we'll see. I mean, when I'm doing the audio, I'll be honest. And if I get choked up, I get choked up. I figure that's just the way it's going to be.
right, right. Yeah, yeah. I would imagine. Yeah, there are some. I'm thinking of some very specific chapters where, yeah, I would imagine that would not be easy to read. Uh, you know, especially your early childhood, and some other things that I won't go into because people need to read it for themselves. I mean, there's some kind of shocking revelations that are made, and
And it's the twist at the end of the book,
yeah,
which is really, who saw that coming?
I did
And
not.
my daughter,
Yeah.
my daughter and I have, when we're not in the middle of this, we're speaking privately. I'll tell you, um, some things about that, but we joke about that all the time. My daughter has a wicked, wicked sense of humor, and we just so many different times. We have so many different jokes, but not that it was a funny subject, but the irony and just the what the hell, where did that come from moment
Yeah, I'm sure.
was,
Yeah.
but now we laugh about it. It's, we have a lot
Sometimes
of
you
good
have to,
laughs.
right? You have to. Yeah,
Yeah.
And I think that's important. Sometimes you have to find the humor in some of those types of situations, or it'll drive you crazy. So I think that's a good thing, personally. Um, yeah. Have you? I was curious if have your bandmates read the book? Have they? I mean, obviously, you know, they both contributed to the book, but have they read the book? And if so, what are their initial reactions?
No, they have not.
Oh,
Our tour manager has read the book,
hmm.
and she's the only one.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's it.
What were
No
her
one else.
impressions? What?
That's why. Oh, she was. Her perspective was interesting. She thought it was very good, and she was looking at it from a number of angles. She was looking for typos. She was looking for, um, she was kind of looking at it from having been the center of the hurricane. So
Right.
the eye of the storm. So she had different perspectives, but she really thought it was very well done. Nothing but positive, but which I was happy because she would speak up if she felt something was like, oh, this was boring. I didn't, this. So that was a positive review from her. But your review, just I can't say it enough. It was the first review, and it just, like I said, it was the best because if I had read something else, I was hesitant to release this. My goal was to do this for my daughter, and my goal wasn't to put it out to, to bare my soul to the world, so to speak. But it was also, not that I was ashamed of it. I mean, and it was interesting because it was a roller coaster of emotions. It was also interesting to see, how, like you pointed out, very busy. Interesting to see how I just kept putting one foot in front of the other.
Hmm.
And like I say, my comments always been, I've been too stupid to know I couldn't do something. I just like, okay. And my attitude and my mantra is shoot for the moon.
Yeah.
And maybe you get it, but maybe most of the time you probably won't, but probably get a hell of a lot further than if you just sort of said, yeah, I can't do that. But really, honestly, it's always been, I've just been too dumb to know that you can't do that, Carl. I'm like, nah, screw it. I can do that. And I believe that I could do that, even when I couldn't. And so, it was definitely the roller coaster ride of emotions. And then of course, that that transition turned into, wow, looking at my whole life, kind of looking back at it. I laugh, my daughter and I laugh about this when she'll say something, oh, Aaron, wait until you start looking at your life in decades.
Hmm.
Then it's really an interesting journey back. You start looking at your life like, oh yeah, in my 40s. Um, but so it's been interesting from that standpoint, but it's been a roller coaster ride of emotions, and also kind of interesting to look at it and go, wow, you know what? There are things that I had forgotten. And Doc, um, Phil Harrington, Doc knew more about my career than I did. Like
Oh,
there were so many things he would say. Well, what about when you're doing this project? I'm like, oh, you're right. Yeah, no, I remember that, but I hadn't remembered it until he brought it up.
yeah.
So, so it was interesting, and it's also interesting to look at my career because my career up until I did the Headbanger album and I was doing interviews and people would say, well, I knew you as a producer, but I didn't know you were a musician. Or I knew you from the rods, but I didn't know you produced. And
Yeah.
so suddenly both pieces of my career kind of melded into one. And so now there was a whole picture of who I am. And so the book kind of brings that together, makes it cohesive. And, so I'm glad about that.
Yeah.
But I have to say it's been a roller coaster ride, which was why when I read your review and it was a positive one, I was like, thank you, thank you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I love it. I love you touched on this. It's, uh, I found it very inspirational. Yeah, I mean, there's some dark things in there, but yeah, this idea of perseverance, one foot in front of the other, like don't give up. And I think you convey that to you, at least you tried to convey that, I think, to some of the bands you worked with when you were, for production. Um,
Hmm.
again, I don't want to ruin any stories in the book, but just as an example, Blue Cheer with who one of the great rock and roll bands who was in a bad place, specifically with, you know, alcohol and drug abuse at that time, and you were really trying to help them get back on track, and you did so. You know, what a great album that is. But you know, I think, you know, just that kind of inspiration, and you know, and I'm sure, you know, I'm sure there were lots of struggles, and probably, you know, what's conveyed in the book, you know, some of the bands were easy to work with, some not so much, you know, like I think of
Mhm.
Young Turk, you know, I mean, you know, inspirational, and also I'm sure
The
horrifying
young,
times.
you
So
know, I'm still very good friends with several of those musicians, and Rick, the drummer, he and I are like brothers. And but I loved Young Turk. They were such a unique band. They were so cool. The fact that they were, most of them were Cuban, and except for Billy, the bass player, was always called the Gringo. Like me, I was the Gringo as well. Um, but they're so intergenerational in that Hispanic community, that Latin community. And so these guys were able to communicate and relate to and connect with people, with children, elderly, that everybody, all walks, all ages. And it was very natural for them. So everywhere they went, they made friends, people loved them. And it was really interesting, eye-opening to see. But to see what that intergenerational style of living, when it's communal, tribal,
yeah.
what that really accomplishes, you know, which I think for me, the takeaway on that was we need more of that, because these guys were, you know, they're all really great guys, and they really look at they look at people as a whole, and not, you know, oh, if those guys are old, or oh, those kids, get away from me. They're like, you know, it takes a village to raise children, and they're kind to the elderly, and they
Yeah.
actually find the elderly interesting, you know, which was cool.
Yeah, I love that.
So,
I can't remember, was it Rick? I can't remember who it was. Where, yeah, you would, I think, went into a diner, and you know, the town diner there, and your hometown, and yeah, he's chatting with, yeah, elderly people, you know, and
mhm,
this is, you know, what, 19, was that 93-ish, I guess, somewhere around there.
mhm.
Yeah, this long-haired kid,
And
you know, from
that
Florida.
was Billy, that
Oh,
hair
Billy.
down the middle of his back, little white boy with total like sleeves back then. You know, he totally tattooed and just looked like a wild man. And you know, talking to these elderly people, sitting up with what's going on? And
Yeah.
there's Billy, and they love him. You know,
Yeah,
so
it's really too bad
and
that.
they're also a big challenge. They were a challenge.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, that's definitely conveyed in the book too. Like this, the, yeah, that party mentality, which, yeah, it's amazing they all
Ooh.
lived through some of that stuff. But you know, and it's really, it's too bad that the timing was such a weird time. Because yeah,
Mhm.
super talented band. And I remember them, but you know, after I read your book, I went and looked them up, you know, looked up some videos, because it had been so long, you know, since I had heard them. And I was like, oh yeah, I remember this. Yeah, these guys are great. Yeah, really
Mhm.
cool sound, and especially at that time, it was so different from what was happening. Um,
Mhm.
it's too bad that,
Yeah, that's the timing was just a little bit off for them.
yeah,
And but they're a great band. They were fantastic.
yeah, it's too bad they didn't continue to pursue. I think, you know, if they'd waited a little, you know, waited it out,
Mhm.
I think they would have done well eventually. But
I agree.
yeah,
Hey, c'est la vie.
yeah, yeah. What are you gonna do? Um, uh, I wanted to ask you, I know, you know, you mentioned, of course, kind of, let's look at the, you know, we've been talking about your past, talking about your book, which, you know, examines your entire history, your past. Let's talk a little bit more about the history, you know, about the future. You talked a little about, you know, new Rod's album being worked on. What else do you have what else do you have going on?
I have a project with Mike Santorciero and John Hahn, and that project is, we don't know what we're calling it, but I think we have 8 songs now. I'm just putting drum tracks down, and John's finishing, you know, guitars and so on. And so far, Billy's been on tour, but Billy Sheehan's played bass on 2 of the tracks, and hopefully he's going to continue to play bass on this album. And I love it. It's kind of a prog. I don't even know how to categorize things, and I hate categorizing things, but it's probably I don't know, a power metal. I don't know. I don't know how to say it. It's a modern version. It's a little Deep Purple. It's a little. I mean, I hear other bands out there half similar, so I don't know whether they're like power rock or I don't know what I don't know how to label it. And but it's I think it's really really good. I'm really having a great time with it, and hopefully we can do some dates, and that's the goal of that. See if we can't once we finish the album is actually get some at least try to get a couple festival dates. So we'll see.
Oh,
It'll
cool.
be interesting to unfold. And then St. James, we have a new album that I'll be getting the tracks to do the drums to soon, and that whole new St. James album,
Oh, excellent.
which is yeah, which is exciting.
Nice.
So yeah, a lot going on for me.
Yeah,
But
always
it's
amazed.
good incentive to come up here and play my drums and record. And I come up here and I play, and I'm like, oh, that's crap. I'm my own worst critic, and sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I just play like crap. And so, it's a motivator to like, come on, come up with a good drum track, come up with a cool part,
Mm.
play something that you haven't played before, something that's unique to this song that will help move this song forward. And that's a big challenge. So that motivates me because I'm lying awake at night going, come on, let's see, think about that song. Like, what can you do to make the drum tracks better? Because I love to frame the vocals and guitar solos. And I like to set them up, and I like to add energy to the songs, but I also don't want to get in the way. And when I was young, I would just blast through it. Screw it. I've got a chop. I've been working on these chops. I'm going to play them. They don't fit in the song, but I'm going to put them in the song anyway. And I don't have that attitude anymore.
Yeah, that's cool.
So
Yeah, I'm excited. When St. James album, do you guys have a target date for a release on that, or maybe it's too early
we
to
don't, but the album is done, and I'm
oh,
waiting to get the whole album with click tracks now
oh,
to put drum tracks to.
nice. Nice. How long
Yeah.
does that
So
typically take you to bang out a, like once you get, and I don't know, maybe it's different. It's probably different with every band that you work with, kind of the
it
process.
takes, yeah, it depends. Like I have one song I've worked on for maybe 5 days. I'll come in, I'll play it. I like to keep it fresh because if you're playing to a click track, and I've learned to play with the click track, so I can play a little ahead of the click track. I can play on it, and I can play behind. So I can kind of lay back in the verse, and I can push it a little in the choruses, and I can give it that live feel, even though we're strapped to a click track. And without the click track, quite honestly, now I've been doing it so many years, I don't know that it would be much different without a click track. But I like to have the click track. It gives me a sense of freedom. But I'd like to keep it fresh. So sometimes I'll come in and I'll start playing, and I'll think, you know what? I'm just not inspired today, so I'm going to give it up. And so that'll happen. So now I'm on a track. Like now I'm pretty much dialed in on one song, and I'll come up and, but it may have taken me 5 or 6 days of chipping away at it to get one song done. And then when I'm busy, it's even harder to find time to come and play. So, it all depends, and like I said, I'm my own worst critic. Like I said, when I did the Headbanger album was the first time I wasn't producing something or co-producing it with David or somebody else. And I had no one to bounce ideas off. And like I said, I was the biggest prick I'd ever worked with. You know, I was so critical of everything I did. Like Rob Reiner, "My Life, My Way," the song that was written for my friend Billy Hilfiger and my best friend from high school, Jim Nunes from Nunes Guitars. Um, I really wanted that song to be right, and I was talking to Rob Reiner, and I'm like, Rob, I've been playing the song. I can't get the groove. I can't. It just doesn't work for me. And he gave me the producer talk. Got to put that out of your head and just go sit down and play it.
Yeah.
Don't think about it. And and that helped me. That got me through. His little talk was really key to my finishing that track. So sometimes you just get caught up in your own thing. Plus, recording at home in your own studio is fantastic freedom. But there's also that in the back of your mind. I can go back and do it again.
Mm.
I could come back to this tomorrow. When you're in a studio, it's like, come on, you got to make this happen now. And the other thing I do is by the time I play a track, I don't like to punch in. So by the time I'm done, ready to do a take, it's pretty much I just play one, I play it through.
Hmm.
But to get to that point sometimes takes me 2 or 3 days. So I figure out all the parts where I want to put them, and then I'll listen and go, yeah, that doesn't work. So by the time I'm done with that process, usually it's just all one take.
Oh,
And
wow.
at least that gives it the, the sense of, wow, it sounds live. Like on the Rods album, that was done that way. We're recorded remotely, but it sounds like, we're on fire because, we've all done this before. And when I'm doing those drum tracks, I try to keep them as spontaneous and energetic as I can.
Nice. I love the fact that you do it in one take, like Ronnie James Dio, which you talk a little bit about that in the book as well, is his one take approach. I find that fascinating.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, I find that really
Unbelievable and shocking, really shocking after all the great singers I've worked with. And I pride myself on working on vocals and guitar solos. And it was just, I thought David's memory was skewed, but no, it was, Ronnie was that amazing.
yeah, yeah, he was incredible. I love the fact that yeah, that you reached out to Rob Reiner um and his advice. I think that's cool, especially I would imagine it's because you obviously you wear multiple hats, and as a you're a producer, you're a drummer, and so yeah, I would imagine, yeah, you can easily become your worst critic, and continue to just play it to death, where he's like, dude, just chill out. Like, and you
Exactly.
both have very similar styles, drumming styles. That's one of the reasons I like Anvil a lot too, is I always kind of got that same sort of that vibe, like that Rod's vibe from,
Mhm.
especially his drum work. I always thought that was, yeah. um
He's a great drummer. And we were both, when we first met, we started talking. I was in Toronto and we hung out for the whole day, walked all over the city, went to music stores, my first Chipotle experience. And, and we, as we got to know each other, it was amazing how similar our influences were,
Hmm.
our backgrounds, the drummers that we loved. And, so it was interesting. So yeah, no doubt we have, common influences.
Yeah, for sure.
When I finish a drum track, I'll send it off to David and Freddie, and but I'll say, yeah, okay, here's the final track. And David's always like, for now, he'll probably do this track at least another 1 or 2 times before he's satisfied with it, even though I called it a final track. So, but I think it's important to have your production value. Like it's important to have that, and so as long as I can live with it and not cringe too much when I listen to the playback, then it's a good track for me. And it's okay in my mind. It's okay if I have to redo it as long as it's right. And with the rods, we have a couple sayings. The classic one is, if it takes more than 5 minutes or has more than 5 chords to learn, it's not a good rod. More than 3 chords to learn and takes more than 5 minutes to learn, it's not a good rod song. So that's true. But the other thing was, we call it luck or genius, because when you're in the studio and you're recording and you just inspired, or you play something, and something maybe you never could have played without, that moment in the studio. And we call it luck or genius. Does it matter? It doesn't. You've recorded it. It's now musical history. And, so was it luck? Probably. But does it matter? It comes across as genius. So that's fine. Take the genius part of it.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. That's great.
Yeah,
um
luck or genius.
yeah, that's good. um well, Carl, as always, fantastic chatting with you. So for people that want to pre-order your book, or want to get a hold of your book, where can they go? Where can they find your book?
Uh, well, I've been told by the publisher it's in wherever you buy books. There are 40,000 places you can buy this book, but Amazon.com, and I think you have to type in my name and Tales of Wild Dogs, and it pops up. And the same for BarnesandNoble.com. Type in my name and Tales of a Wild Dog. So that's it. And then we'll have some books available on the Rod's website fairly soon.
Oh, great.
So people looking, they can probably get one there as well. But right now, I have one copy, and and Phil has one. Doc has one copy. I have one copy, and that's the way it'll be until whenever everybody else gets their books. We're not getting any advanced copies.
Okay. Yeah, so for those of you watching, I'll have links in the description below, with the just, what Carl just said, as far as, the Rod's webpage, of course, and then I'll have links to Barnes and Noble and Amazon, so you can pre-order that book, and definitely grab it. It's phenomenal. Like I said before, I could not put it down. I read it in 3 days. It was yeah, just one of those books. I loved it. Could not put it down. And if you don't have the latest Rod's album, Rattle the Cage, go buy it right now. This album kills. This is easily one of the best Rod's albums ever. And it's very high on my list of favorites, for sure. I definitely, this is going to be a top 10 for me for 2024. Phenomenal album, and higher in the top 10 as well. So very good album.
Very, very kind of you. I think it's one of, and like I say, every band goes, "This is our best album we've ever done," but I think this is the best album we've done since the first album.
I
You
agree.
know,
I agree.
I mean, we have a lot of great songs in between, but a lot of elements came into play. Freddie, being our new bass player, gave us a whole sonic different palette, and just his involvement in the band with his friend Mark Rizzo doing the cover, which turned out fantastic, and Chris Collier. He's been on board with the last 4 projects I've done, including Brotherhood of Metal for the Rods. And Chris Collier's been the secret weapon along with Freddie in terms of, we finally have been able to capture the Rod sound, and David's songwriting has just been kicked up a notch. And so,
Yeah, yeah, you guys are on fire right now. Yeah, keep it coming. I can't wait to hear the new material. I'm excited to hear that as well. So, Carl, again, thank you so very much. Absolute pleasure chatting with you, and an honor, really, truly an honor. Yeah. So again, everybody, go buy Carl's book, Tales of a Wild Dog, Memoir of a Rock Warrior. It is excellent. You will very much enjoy it. So, thank you, sir.
thank you so much, and thank you for the kind words and the great review.